Hi, and welcome to Studio Carbon's first ever episode of the series of Design Off. This episode is dedicated to language, and it's only apt we do that because this is going to be a podcast and video which you listen to in a language. So, the way this podcast is going to run is every time we're going to pick an element that we look at designing, which is not traditionally looked at as a vocation of design, and then we're going to deep dive into it with an introduction, with an introspecting session, and then with ideation of what the ideal version of that element could be. And as we go on with this, you'll have 9 design experts, so designers who've been practicing design, which are all the carbons of the studio, who'll be giving their points of view as well as their different knowledge points, assumptions, facts, and just anecdotes of what they know about that topic for the day. In no way are we trying to be experts. This is only for conversations to trigger what is possible in the future to design that particular element, like language for today. So we're going to kick this whole discussion off with a warm-up session, which if you're listening to us or watching us, you're invited to do. Everyone sit nice and straight. Let your backbone from the head right down to your tailbone be nice and straight. Close your eyes and just listen to me. As you have your eyes closed, I want you all to observe your thoughts. Try to see which language they're in. Try to see how they're coming, if there's one thought at a time or a stream of them. Try to see the conversation that your thought has with itself, and just what this feeling of thinking and thought and language is. Just observe yourself and interpret it the way it feels right in your head. And we'll do that for a minute. If there are some aha moments or prompts that come to you, keep them with you. We can use them in our conversations. Because all of us know more than one language, try translating those thoughts in your head itself into another language and see how they feel when you do that. And with this whole experience of observation of the language of our thoughts, let's wrap up this warm-up with a nice deep breath in. Just fill up all your lungs with all the oxygen you can get while it's there. Hold it inside of you and exhale. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Great. And now that everyone's awake and aware of their thoughts and their language, let's kick off this discussion with an introduction session.
Hey guys, I'm Christopher. So my idea of language is, so I'm very inspired by nature. So take a school of fish for instance. Like a school of fish reacts so well together, so they respond to the one next to them. So it looks so much in sync, be it birds or fish. So is that language? Like they react to this. So there's a stimuli and then there's a reaction. So it's how you communicate to a larger group. Say, your idea basically. Like apart from humans, I think orcas are the only ones which have different languages. It was one very exciting thing I got to know, and that has helped them like kind of plan attacks and then surround fishes. So that's a very interesting thing. Apart from humans, how even animals and other kingdoms have developed language, and language has always been a material which kind of helped any group of entities come together as a society. So I think that is one of the main elements of language, bringing things together and then going forward, evolution basically.
Hi guys, my name is Gunga Naveen Kumar. So for me, language is actually a mechanism for channeling the culture and the cultural bonds that we talk about. Like for example, like Christopher is mentioning about nature is what inspires him. Similarly, if you take a country like Japan, they have most of their phrases related to nature and also climate because it's an agricultural society. So what happens is most of this language is taught to children, which becomes a mode for them to actually translate the cultural values, beliefs that they hold. Because the culture influences language so much, I feel that this is one of the parts that we need to focus.
Hi guys, this is Jitesh. I happened to read a book yesterday, and then it happens to be about language. So we know language is basically part of what is referred to as the cognitive revolution that happened in humans. And as Chris mentioned, there are many other animals also which do have a kind of language. Interestingly, what the book mentioned is one of the possible reasons for humans to develop a language. Maybe it's the reason or it's the consequence, not very sure, but the main thing was cooperation. So cooperation is a direct consequence of language, and maybe language itself developed for the sole reason that we could cooperate. So that sounded to me like a very core theme which can go around language as such, because especially in today's time also, when we are thinking of pandemics like corona, what is expected of us is to cooperate in a certain way, and that is directly driven by the language that we use. So in this context, again, language kind of assumes importance. So I think we can be mindful about this aspect of language and cooperation while we're having today's discussion.
Hi guys, this is Manikanta. This is more of an opinion I started thinking of why we need a language first. And when I gave a thought, I got reminded of the wall in between us. This is the way we are divided among us. I'm a Telugu, I'm a Hindi, I'm a Japanese, I'm Chinese. These are all like verbal communication walls we have in between. I felt that is the way we discriminate ourselves. And when we go in the history, like that is where we started separating ourselves, like from being one kind of humanity to somewhere like different species of humanity, different tribes and everything. So I felt like, what if there is no language at all? I mean, what if there is a new way of communication? Maybe a gesture can be like a communication. The way Chris said, between animals, they don't talk, maybe they talk with a sound, maybe, but it can be universal. I mean, if there is a possibility of universal between animals, plants, and humans, what can that language be? This is what I thought, and we can start there maybe.
Hi everyone, this is Maniteja. I gave a thought about why we need to discuss about a language. Now also we are speaking in one common language, even we belong to different places where we know multiple languages. So I see language is like a feeling of your expressions. It's a thoughtful expressions. What is a language your mother speaks when you are a kid? How much you understand, even you don't know the script. So I see language has been evolved like getting into the script level. Even before that, it's just a way of gesture, like an Art Manikanta is actually telling. Why I told the thoughtful expression? Because it became more structured and it evolved throughout the generations. Like what you learn from your parents will be different from what you are going to give it to them. Like that, always there is a new evolvement. Like there is the thing called in French, I think some 2000 words or something will be introduced every year. The 200 years back, what the English is different and will be different today.
Hello guys, this is Neil over here. So for me, language is a way to get people do your binding or bidding. That is how you make people understand what you want and how you want them to react. Just to build on what Manikanta said, if there is a story in history called as Tower of Babel. So everyone was speaking one unified language at that point. This was after the Great Flood had happened. And they were trying to build a tower that was going to reach heavens. And God did not want that. To stop that whole thing, the God made different languages for people so that the tower could stop. So this is one way of understanding that because of language, we cannot go ahead in a very unified way. But at the same time, if we look at the modern age computer programming, we have major computer programming languages, and because of that, we have arrived at a state where we can communicate very easily with each other. To build on that, if you take quantum programming that is going to come, quantum computers, where we don't understand what is the nature of the state itself, because we have never experienced quantum mechanics. How are we going to program a language for those things? So those are the few questions that we have, and how can we deal into that is a thing that we should discuss.
Hi guys, this is Shubham, and I have been an avid language learner since the time I remember. It was first introduced as French, and just the thought of understanding some different world completely, it enticed me a lot. And according to me, language is any form of communication. Even when you nudge someone or just look at them, stare at them, every single point is a language. It is a form of communication between animals, between humans, between robots. Everything is a language. Humans all over the world, they have come up with 7,000 different languages, which is a lot to comprehend, because one language, when you create, it forms a universe of its own, like a reality of its own. So it's very mind-boggling that human minds have invented more than 7,000 cognitive universes, and that is really nice. But these languages, they all have different mindsets. Like, people who speak a particular language, they will have completely different mindsets than someone else. There are many examples of that. For example, one language will speak only in directions, and because of them, the directional sense of languages will be very, very good. Some people will not have names for colors at all. They will speak about colors like metaphors, like as dark as the night or something. Everything changes the way that you think, and it has its biases. For example, German and Spanish, they have genders. Same objects have different genders. So if you ask a German guy to describe a bridge, since it's feminine, they will say it's beautiful and elegant. If you ask a Spanish guy, he will say it's long and rigid and strong. Everything changes because of languages. And here is where the sad part comes. We are losing one language per week. And most of our study of human psychology is based on US English speaking population. And that is not doing justice to what humans can think about. So these biases and everything, whatever we are capable of, needs to be widespread. And I think this can be thought of.
So hello guys, this is Swapnil here. So the understanding about the language, it is very much similar as the Shubham has explained, that there is not one language what we actually think about that key, which is very particular to convey your thoughts. It cannot be just verbal. It can be like expressions. It can be the touch, nudge. Like we have created body languages, expression languages, so many things. But what really intrigues me here is like that key, when you think it as an element of evolution, okay, there has been evolution of languages since from the ancient times. As basic as sketching, like sketches the symbols, and basically it was about the vibes, which is still considered very strong language in terms of that. I just wanted to like find out what is there in the nature, okay, which actually has a language among all the living beings, and how human or artificial languages are actually separating us here. My notion of language is come to patterns. So when actually I talk about the patterns, it actually comes from the natural patterns here. More you actually look into it, more you figure out like how it leads to very interesting phenomena, which is I will prefer to call mathematics. So when actually like I talk about the patterns in the language, if you can even evaluate yourself, like whatever we actually speak of, it is actually just a repetition of patterns in a different context, which actually forms different meanings. And if you actually correlate it with the algorithms or like the formulas, it's not very different than mathematics. And when I actually talk about the mathematics, it gives us the idea of okay, it is very artificial concept, like generated by the human beings. And the nature is a repetition itself. There is a pattern, and what the mathematics has been evolved is actually around that only. Actually, the idea which excites me about the next turn, the future language, is that how the current language system, the understanding, how the natural like language in terms of like the universal, like the totality of the universe, the patterns, how actually it can merge together and the future language can be evolved. So this is something I really find intriguing, and I'll be talking about that.
Amazing. Thank you. Wrapping up with me, I think for me, the one question I've been asking most deeply is what is the purpose of a language? A lot of that you guys also talked about right now. So is it to actually communicate? Is it to initiate action between ourselves or someone else? Is it just stay sane? Because when we feel, we think, our gray matter is made to think. If we think, how do you think if you don't have a language, whether it's visual or with a script. So I think just that question of what the purpose of a language is something that I ponder upon a lot. When I'm thinking about that purpose, I think about things like, in that purpose of a language, if language is about these sounds and symbols and shapes and these common formats and rules of communication so that we can all understand each other better, where does silence fit in? And what is the sound of silence? Taking a little bit of cue on what Swapnil was talking about on the larger universe, if I go out into space and I'm somewhere in the cosmos, in the middle of nowhere, there's silence. In that silence, what is the language that I'm speaking with myself, with things around me? If language comes down to an interaction, and if that's the purpose of a language, then is gravity a language? Is the pull that I'm getting from the earth a language? So just where we define language and what its purpose is something that constantly makes me question the whole way we perceive and interact with language, and if it's very limiting the way we are right now. The other thing that I would love for us to talk about is the format of a language. So one of my other biggest issues with language, or at least the languages that I've been taught and I've used all my life to communicate, are linear. One thing leads to another. One word is followed by another, and you hear that whole line to make sense of what I'm saying to you. But when I'm looking at my thoughts, that's not how they run. They run in buzzwords, they run in bubbles, they run in imagery, they collide with each other, they combine to become something else. But in no way am I able to communicate that. And as a designer, I find that even more intriguing because we're trained to think in more than one medium. We're trained to think in visuals, to think in words, to think in sounds, to think in smells. So where does that lead a designer's language to? What are we then? And one last thing that I want to wrap up with is just extension of the format conversation. Are emoticons a format? Is that a language? Is mathematics a language? Is that a format? And then again the purpose discussion comes in, because each of them serve a different purpose. And in the middle of all of that, the most cliched quotations that we can think about around language are the ones about love being a universal language. It's something that I feel for each one of you right here. But in that whole conversation then, if language is so ephemeral and intangible and subjective, then I never know what I feel is the same thing that's getting communicated to you. So then again, comes back to the question of the purpose of a language. So those are all my thoughts. There are more questions than answers, but I would like to wrap up my conversation with this, and I hope we address some of those in our discussion today. With this, we come to a wrap up of our introduction session. Thank you all. There were some very, very interesting, very, very diverse points of view here. If there's anyone over here who has a question or wants to actually add a point after all the nudges we just got, we can kick off. We have Neil to start off.
So just to build on the word love, so when I was researching the things, so in current English dictionary, we just have one word called love. And the way our modern language has developed, we are reducing the words that actually mean things, and we are making words that don't mean much. But if you go back in past history, Greek had 6 words for love. Eros for sexual passion, Philia for deep friends, Ludus for playful love, and rest on goes like for love for everyone, long-standing love that goes into a deep romantic relationship that you are being, and love for self. So if you don't have emotional literacy, then you can't actually manage your own emotions, and how you will be able to teach yourself about different things is a question. So maybe in current time we are losing out on those emotional literacy words where we need to know about how we are dealing with things. And that is where, if we are going into pictography like the emicons, if emojis have a bit more sense of what the exact feeling is, then maybe yeah.
Okay, just quickly building on that point, firstly, yes, emotions, and coming back to the point of if language actually helps us stay sane, then for us to be able to interpret our emotions is a big important clause in an ideal language. And another interesting irony I wanted to point out here is we started off as human beings when we used to communicate with images, when we had cave wall, paintings and things like that. We went down into developing these amazing 7,000 languages Shubham just told us about. And now somehow with the digital medium, and especially in social distancing as we are sitting in right now, we're going back into GIFs and memes and emoticons and other ways of expression. So is this a sort of loop that we keep jumping in and out of? I don't know. Again, leaving it out with a question. Jitesh has something to say.
Okay, so this is a very interesting thing which we're discussing right now. I mean, both of it connects. Like what Ithika referred to is, I think if you guys have read the book Story of a Life, it is referred to as orthography in language. Language having a directionality, and images are a very simple way of just breaking that linearity. So you experience the whole emotion in totality, in completeness, and at the same time, which is a very powerful thought, I feel, to break this linear kind of language that we have. And again, what Itika is saying about emotions, there's also called mimetic literature, like memes, emoticons, all these things have a very specific emotional feeling which gets communicated. So these are like really interesting developments that are happening today's time. And yeah, it's interesting just to see all these things.
Imagine in the beginning of time when someone first tried to communicate something to another person, that was like a birth of a language. But that language evolved on its own based on what the people needed at that time. Then some other people learned those languages and it spread that way. It's not like those two people who made that language own that language in any way. Languages are not a part, they are a part of a culture, but they are not owned by some group of people or a clique. Languages have their own life, they are breathing, living things. It's like I'll use a metaphor of a city, like two people come build a house, then more people come in and join it, and the city forms and evolves organically according to how the need of the hour of those people are. If today we decide that here market is not required and we need a hospital, we'll break down that and make a hospital over there. That is how languages evolve. They are not owned by or governed by anyone. So if emoticons are the need for communicating better emotions, then that is what we should be building in the city.
So I would like to add few points on which like Itika told, and even like what Jitish is actually talking about linearism, like in terms of words. First, I will start with the silence as a language. There is a saying in Telugu called Maunam Ardhangikaram. Maunam means like silence. Ardha Angikaram means like half acceptance. So if someone is actually asking something, if you are not telling no for it, means you are like half accepting it. If your mom asks that do you want to eat something in excess, like you want but you won't tell that, you just keep silent, but still she gets the food to you and give it to you. So how, what is the language between you both? You won't talk, but the feeling of yours is understood by your mom. So what is the language there? So there is a silence which has a meaning. Is it a language or not? So that is one thing. And second thing is like things actually pop up in terms of expressing the things and all. If you just change the order of words in language, like maybe in English you have active and passive, the whole context or the meaning itself gives a different feel to it. So now like it's very similar. I think yesterday I happened to watch one TED talk related to language. I think his name is Michael Corballis. He's talking about the evolvement, like how this what do you call bipedalism came, like from monkeys, like how two, like how the humans are actually evolved. They started using their legs and the hands are actually free because there is nothing there to do with the hands. Then the same thing came, so then they started giving the expressions, like you have hands, like where you can actually show gestures and all. So slowly it has transmitted onto their body parts where the face become the main image, like you tell something from the face. Then that it became to the mouth, so you have something to talk. That again came to the scripted way. So if you see, if you can draw lines with what we are discussing before, from there again it becoming a intangible thing, exactly what Ithika is talking about. Like now there is no words, again there is messaging, chatting happened, then you can't see the face and there is no mouth involved, and later some emojis came and there should add more meaning and emoticons with some expressions and memes are coming. So there are like some similarities. Is it a cycle of the things which are going back?
Okay, so while we were discussing the emojis, a very interesting thing to actually see in terms of like the wide view. For example, the very beginning we started with the pictorial techniques for the language as a caveman, and then as Shubham was saying that it depends on the need of the language what actually you need, and that's how it actually gets evolved. At the very early time it was like very difficult and if you see, it was more like storytelling. Okay, people really wanted to convey so much, but they didn't know how to actually convey it. So that's why it started with the picture, because what they can imagine, they wanted to convey that exactly as it is was. But with the time, actually, when they actually understand that they need accuracy, and that's how the language, they wanted to be more detailed. So the pictures became into the simple symbols, then they become like a lines and the curves, and that's how the detail of the language started coming. I mean, we had the Kamenka language, which was totally pictorial. Then it became like the detailed curves and lines. Then we have the Median. Okay, if you'll see the Egyptians, okay, they were like well-developed civilization. They were well-developed in technology, in everything. And even when you actually talk about the communication, but still they were using the pictorial languages as well as the detail, you can say words, both combined. So, and now again project the same thing at the present moment. We started as a kid, okay, we start with the pictorial techniques, then we actually learn the language. And again, right now at the current time, how we are actually communicating each other, we are talking, we are adding emojis both together. It's pretty much, you can see the pattern is being repeated from the old age to again in the middle age and again the current age. It's one kind of thing which can actually, you can make a kind of formula which can actually project it for the future language as well. Maybe like there's something is, we already have what to actually decode for the future language. So this pattern is something, right, very fascinating.
I wanted to add a point during what Jitesh was talking about series, right? When we have a set of words that we put together and form a sentence, it also changes a lot when somebody puts up some words before and changes, just their arrangement also changes everything. And we are talking about linearity generally and of a lot of things. But when I actually look at it from a, let's say, imagery point of view, what Shubham was talking about, or let's say video point of view, with every medium, the amount of information that we are getting from it is increasing, right? So if I look at it a video sort of a thing, which is increasing the amount of information I get, still it's a series of pictures for me, which is also in a similar pattern of where somebody is talking to me in terms of words. It's like how they are put up will change everything. Similar way in videos also, how they are put up, what sequence they are put up actually changes everything. So maybe our imagery or our way of thinking maybe is also in terms of certain series or certain ways. I don't know how it is. That's a thing that I'm pondering upon. Like maybe our language, the way we talk and the way we are thinking, maybe by evolution, slowly we have got in tune with that. That is one of the things that I'm thinking about. And maybe this era is also like that, where we never had this much of things around us which ask us for a lot of attention, right? Everything asks for attention. You want to just focus on one thing, suddenly something rings, and everything asks for a lot of attention. So this point of time, actually having a language that makes it simple for people maybe is a good idea. I don't know what it is. And also one more thing I wanted to add on silence. So this was during time when I was learning music. So then one beautiful thing my music teacher has told us, it's not about the notes, it's not about the tone of you, the pitch or anything. It's all about the silence. How much of silence is between each one of those tones defines what kind of feel that it gives.
Oh, that's very nice way Konga put it, then silence. So one thing I wanted to bring back was the idea of sign language. So this, they had also tried it with gorillas. So other animals, they do not have a well-defined voice box for creating different frequencies to talk as such. But then they're really good at pictorially like doing stuff. So they were able to learn the American Sign Language. So that gorilla's name is Coco, and then there was few chimpanzees as well. So they communicated throughout their life with their owners. In a way, it's up to 350 language signs as such. So these are some interesting things. So this led on me to think another instance. What do you think a blind person dreams of? And what do you think a deaf and dumb person dreams of? So this was one documentary I'd seen long back. So a blind person's dream is entirely very high defined sound. So it's more of sounds and experiences. And a deaf and dumb person, say a person who's both deaf and dumb, and say even if he's blind, it is mostly just touch oriented. So how they feel the world. So basically the way you sense the world around you becomes how you talk to yourself too in your dreams. So dreams reflect a lot. So this led me to think basically it's all that happens in your brain, right? At the end of the day, it's just some electrical impulses. And this connecting with what Elon Musk is doing right now, or with Neuralink. So Neuralink is basically a brain-machine interface, which is trying to communicate people along with machines. So basically decoding electrical impulses. Say it could be even for languages. So what if one electrical signal is just passed on the same way from one person to the other person's brain to decode? Still, context might matter. So I think context is a very big thing in language. So how we decode a particular even signal.
Okay, so one thing I got stuck there from the beginning is about quantum computers and all what Neil said. So quantum computers, how they work, like there is no one such thing like that we understand as a language. If you go, it will like a more molecular level, atomic level, how atoms, each atoms talk to each other and how they form a molecule. There is a communication in between them. But in universally, there are atoms everywhere. And so the communication as well. So how these atoms coming together and forming some compound, like we are built of those atoms, and some parts are like everything is built of these atoms, and the communication is there in between. But these are all universally available. So maybe the communication is also universal among all these things, how they need to build up. So maybe that can be a like form of ingredients we can have to build up a new language. So there is a big gap when we have language for ourselves and there is a language for machines. So that's where there is a C language and everything are there. Right now, what Neuralink and everything, like there is a big gap between how we humans interact with computers. There is a gap. So with Neuralink, there might be a chance like where we can directly communicate with the computers. That is where we have to go maybe. So if Babylon happened because like God don't want us to reach that higher level, maybe that is where we have to aspire for. Like if that diversity came because of God doesn't want us to do something, maybe we have to challenge God. Maybe we have to have different sense of communicating. Maybe if I speculate too much, we don't need to have a communication. Like I just send you a thought, maybe like the electric impulse he's talking. It's between you and me. Like the communication or the silence, that interaction that's supposed to be happen. It doesn't need a medium. It needs one more person. If there is no other person, if you are just alone, I mean, you don't need it. But if the interaction need to happen, you don't need medium. Like maybe that is where we can see.
Thank you, Ganta. Just throwing out some more questions built on what we just discussed. The first one is, if there is no one listening, is there even a language? Even if there are our thoughts, we are listening to our own thoughts. There is always a listener. So does the existence of language require a listener? A question. Just because we're talking about designing an ideal language, maybe that's a prompt. Another prompt I wanted to put out is, if there is no memory, is there a language? If we didn't have any form of remembrance, if we only lived in the now, and if being present and mindful, which is the utopia a lot of people in the world talk about, in that being now, if I didn't have any understanding of memory or built up things that I've sort of added up through the years that I've spent, then what does language mean in that case? Is there a language that we can create which doesn't require memory, which is just prompt responses? I mean, is that another utopia? And one last point, which is slightly less crazy than the ones I just mentioned, is around what Shubha was talking about, language being a living being, it having its life of its own, it evolving with culture, the culture evolving with it, and all of those things of dynamism. In that scenario, there's a very interesting tension that I see about where the world is headed right now, because we're in a world of globalization where we're all connected. So in that case, if I'm speaking in a certain language and whatever I speak is then translated into another language for someone else to know it or understand it or share it or learn from it, whatever is lost in that translation, how do we quantify that in terms of whether it was worth the translation or not? Whether it's worth for someone else to learn a language, and just for example, right now those technologies and apps that we have which do translations for us, what if instead of them doing translations, simply like these signals and links that we're talking about, they just make me understand what it was without the need for a language as a medium? And in that whole translation philosophy, if we're all trying to communicate everything that all of us are doing all the time across cultures, it will still create some universality. So that essentially eventually may trickle down to a universal language, which will add sameness, which will kill diversity, which is against the laws of nature itself.
Okay. I would just like to discuss a few points about how languages change how people interact or behave. First thing is, there are a group of people called Matsis people in Peru. Whenever they speak, they have to tell any information, how they learnt about it, and when was it that they learned. In a world of fake news, this language speaking, it becomes very essential. So if you are asking someone that how many apples are there in your bag, that person using that language will say, last time I checked, there were 3 apples in my bag. They have to say that every time for everything. There are a list of 100 words, like hundreds of words, which are temporal words, which will guide how the language is spoken for each and every incident that happens and at what time they observed it. So this is very essential in that language. Another thing is, suppose in English, if you are seeing someone, so there was this experiment done where many people were shown a guy accidentally dropping a vase of flour and it's breaking. So the same thing was shown to other people speaking different languages. So in English, you will say that he broke the vase because of the requirement of English being there a subject and an object. In Spanish, you will just say the vase broke. There's no subject required for that. Because it was an accident, it will be just the vase broke. But what this does is, English speaking people will have a certain tendency to blame someone because he broke the language. Concentration, half of the mind will go there. Spanish speaking people will concentrate on that incident being an accident. So just changing the context or the language, it matters a lot. Also, Aborigines in Australia, the ones I talked about, who speak in directions. So most of our languages are self-centered. Like we talk in terms of us, like in front of me or right, left, everywhere. So they were given a list of images of a baby, like growing up to an old man, and they were asked to arrange them in chronology. But the most interesting thing was when they were facing north, they arranged it like this. When they were facing south, they arranged it like this. When they were facing east, they arranged it towards us and then away from us. Because for them, chronology is always east, west, north, south. It is in place. It is not around you. It's not always left to right or right to left. This basic understanding of spatial and temporal things, they change a lot. And maybe if we are designing a language, we can be conscious of this and we can make design a language which takes these things into consideration. Adding on to the universal language point, so I have been learning Esperanto. It is a constructed language which was made in 1950s or 60s, very old. And it took roots of Latin and made a very simple language with very simple syntax. All nouns end in O, all adjectives end in A. There is no proper structure to it. You can use it anyway, anyhow. There have been many stories that I have come across where an Italian woman will go visit her friend in Japan. Neither does he understand Italian nor she understands Japanese, but both of them can understand each other because of Esperanto. Universal language existence doesn't mean that you lose your own diversity and your own mother tongue or language. They are all going back to their houses, speaking Italian, speaking Japanese, but all people in the world, they come midway to a common point and just speak a simple language for communicating with each other. That is the idea of a universal language. It is not either this or that.
So first thing first, like when Gonga was actually mentioning about that, when he sees the video frames and all this, like the thing, okay, like a series, when he specifically talk about that. So if you go to the very basic for the language, so you will see that all the language composition, as you know, it's linear. Okay, language is linear. It has a kind of series formation, what you can say formula. There are like noun, pronoun, then adjective and everything are combined together and then there is tense, all these things, and then finally it become like a sense. So, and that actually kind of leads to the two important points. One is the efficiency, and second, what actually Gonga been talking about, the silence. And so like the Kanta has been talking about, okay, like like without speaking, like okay, there is a pure silence, you just understand each other. But if you see that a very fair fetch like to achieve, if you really consider the concept of silence, you can also put it that way, like okay, the less you speak and the more efficient it is to understand the language and think lesser to figure it out, that also kind of achieves toward the same thing. So I will give very good, very interesting example again from the mathematics only. So for example, like you can actually describe a situation in a whole paragraph, and you can say that okay, and the same thing can be represented just in one line with few symbols and few annotations, and it describes the exact same. It actually brings me back from the memory. Okay, like for example, there was one problem called derivation, which takes only half of the page to derive. Okay, but when you go to explain the same thing, okay, it takes like a whole 40 minutes of time to explain to everybody. But actually, it's just that's it, that much. That is a kind of language itself. Okay. And then when you talk about the universality, okay, when you're actually talking about that, for example, Kanta and Chris brought the point of the Neuralink and all the more like a telepathy concept. But again, it's something like that when you have to have an object for that. Okay, you have to have somebody to communicate for it, something which can respond. But and again, like when you talk about the responsive like universality, there are the time, okay, when you have to communicate when it's not alive. That is something like that. I mean, language is not just about the conveying to somebody who can give you response, but also it's about interacting with surroundings. That could be also one language. And now again, I'll bring back to the previous point what I had told about the natural patterns, how they can actually be formed as forming the language, and that might work for living as well as non-living. I mean, it's very much like if you just think about an animal perspective or any vendor perspective, you go around places, you just try to figure out things, you make sense out of it. I mean, basically, you're reconstructing the thought. It's kind of, or forming a pattern and then categorizing it for your understanding, and that's how you interact with your surrounding. Same thing I will try to answer your question, Ithika, that if you are in outer space where you have nothing else to interact, how the language actually go there. Okay, so for example, if I say my concept is, I mean, hypothesis is that pattern could be the language. If I'll just see around, okay, there has to be some kind of pattern what will give me information to figure out what is actually happening, and it can act as a language. It can actually elaborate in a way more, but yeah, I will just stop here to make a point. One more thing, just last thing. When
okay, go ahead.
It is a very good example for this language and the mathematics. Okay, the concept thing. It's actually case study. Anybody can look, which is very interesting, and it actually had happened. Like two friends from two different countries who speak two different language. They try to interact with each other using data. So you can just Google Dear Data on Google, and you can see their postcards, how they actually used to interact with each other, like how they used to convey the information in terms of pictorial, but again, it was like data format. It was a form of data.
I'll just start with the same question I had previously. Like everybody's asking about, okay, Shubham pointed out this point, like we always talk about left, right, like we are the center of whole thing. So actually I talked to Sadhguru about this one day, like when he was there on campus. So what he mentioned that day was that there's no left or right to you, because when you turn anywhere, everything changes, right? Only pressure or forces that we can experience is either inward or outward. That's just to answer that particular thing. Maybe that might make sense to some. And coming back to the how the language is used as a communication and all of that. So I feel that, for example, if I'm talking to a new person, culturally completely different, and I have a completely different language from them, it all comes down to, I think, the amount of information I need to communicate. There's a minimum required information for that to communicate. Okay, he wants to say that, okay, dog is barking, but for that I need a minimum amount of info, like some information to decode. So these are based also on a lot of perceptions that we have, based on whatever language or whatever science he does or the other person does. So with less information, what happens is, like for example, if there is a photo of dog barking or a video of dog barking, it's a better thing for me. I can easily understand. But with less information, if he's telling in something, there will be a bit of guessing work of, what are the implications, like based on whatever cultural context I am from, I'll have certain implications, and also from my previous experience I try to guess. It's more of that. So this is where that lost in translation wala phase that we are talking about will come to. I think that's the point that comes here. That lost in translation is all about the information that I need as a person to decode that. And have you guys heard about that blind man on the elephant story? I'll just quickly tell, like in a 20 seconds or something. So it's basically there's a king who calls the minister and tells him to call all the wise blind men in the country. So then the minister goes and calls all the wise men, and he also asks them to get an elephant into the room, like a big giant elephant. So big giant elephant is there in front of the king, and all the wise blind people are there, and he asks them to touch the particular thing, whatever is there in the center, and tell what it is. So blind people don't know that it's an elephant. They all go and touch the elephant at different parts. And then the king asks them, like, what is it? And then everybody tells a different thing. Somebody who touched the tail says that, okay, it's like a rope. I think I was holding a rope. And then somebody touches the side of the thing and they say it's a carpet, something. So basically, and then they end up in fighting and all of that. Everybody's truth is different. But the whole thing is, if you consider that elephant as a reality, we all can't see the reality as a whole. That's what the whole thing is about. From all of that, because of our sensory limitations or whatever, we can experience only some part of it. And then in that also, we have, like, for example, my leg might be tingling now, but I'm maybe focusing, or my attention is at some part. So that actually narrows down the amount of information I'm getting now, consciously. From there, I make theories out of it, and I make judgments out of it, and then I form beliefs about that. And with that, when somebody is talking to me, I'll try to process the information based on that.
Yeah, one thing I want to talk, like, you want to give an example about directionality. So I happened to attend one session which is related to the psychology. Here, like, people are asked to come in front of the stage voluntarily, have to close their eyes. In that, one of the exercise is that they are supposed to close their eyes, and they will ask them to rotate within the place where they are standing. The psychologist asked the question, turn towards your north or turn towards south. 60 to 70% started turning their heads towards up, and when it is south, people started looking towards down, because they are imagining directions as, like, suppose it's an India map. He told the example, like, as you are from south, like, you know the north is towards up, so you turn towards up. It's very connected to what Ganga is telling. There is no direction if you are actually turning. And there is one hint I got from what Chris has written in terms of silets and constellations and patterns. It's like how our ancestors assess the rainfall, like how it is actually coming. Even my grandfather used to tell, like, yeah, I think it is going to rain. 90% of the times, yes, it actually rains. Like, what is the way, like, how they know? It's easy to put the experiences. Yeah, there is one more thing I want to add related to the words. Shubham is talking about Esperanto as a language which has the simplicity to coordinate, like, the people from two different universes can talk in that level. So, like, if you consider English has so many number of words, more than like 250,000 words, and there is a language in Papua New Guiana which has only 11 letters or something in this alphabets, in which they actually make a language. It's like so simple. So is there any definition in terms of the number of words? Like, in general, like I follow cricket, there are names of the persons which are so long, like 75 words or something, which are like that. So how come, like, you can make the same thing like very simple and it can be like too long enough, or else how can be like so simple, like what Kanta is talking about in terms of language? Like, when we learn the basics of computers at the early stages, they talk like there is a human language and you need to give an expression in terms of input by pressing the key, and there is a compiler which converts the binary code. So when it dig deep into it, the binary code is also defined by the human being, and they made it like a human language. And are we defining the same language, telling that this is a machine language? So actually we are talking to them like a machine in that language what we are actually defined. So we are creating a circle around us and telling that we can't go beyond it, or else is there any way that we can break it and move forward?
Amazing. Thank you, Teja. It was a very nice wrap up, actually. We have lots of prompts in here, and just two final points that I just want to add out to this whole prompt discussion for us to ideate better on. One is the importance of being bilingual, and where a lot of science and neuroscience tells us that when you know more than one language, it actually helps you with your intelligence, with the neural synapses in your head, and actually being able to allow you to connect with more things than you normally would if you know only one language. So when we think about an ideal language, think about a bilingual one language also or more. And one last thing I wanted to just point out is it's interesting that all of us in our mother tongues, between the 9 of us, the starting point and the essence of that mother tongue is and stems from Sanskrit. But that was not something that came up in any of our discussion at all. If that leads to any interesting prompts that hit your head, just putting it out there. Because this prompt discussion led to some very, very interesting points coming out, and between the 9 of us itself, we've realized that we want to go back and listen to some of these points again to be able to remember them when we're ideating on the ideal language. So we're going to wrap up this session with the introspection itself, and we'll open it up as an ideation session into another call that we do in the coming week. The good part of this is we're going to put out, if you're listening to us, then an audio. If you're watching us, then a video. And through the video, you'll also have not just the points that we're discussing, but we'll also put out the URLs of each of these references that we gave in all our discussion for you to refer to. We'll keep out some time where we open it up for anyone who's listening to us or watching us to put in their ideas that you'd want to be addressed in the ideation session and try to truly co-create it. And just putting it out in the universe in an extreme way, if you think there are experts we could invite for that ideation session who could really, really help into diving into this much better, whether it's a neuroscientist or a linguist or an author or anyone else that you think is relevant, please hit us up on who that could be, and we'd love to get them over and actually take this into a more constructive ideation session, which is multidisciplinary. There is so much in this world to know, and if 9 of us could come up with so many discussions that I had no clue about, I just wonder if the whole universe and everyone in it was talking to each other in a language that's universal. How cool would that be? And on that note, we shall wrap up our first ever podcast, videocast, whatever it's called, on our series of Design Off, with this one dedicated to design of language. Also, thank you for all the questions you sent us on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and calls. We really appreciate that. Because this discussion has been so open-ended and diverse, we'll make sure that we address those questions and bring them out in our session of ideation, because that's where all the action is going to be. From all parts of the world and all different homes we're in, thank you all for checking in. We will wait to hear your ideas for our ideation session next week.
Bye everyone.
Awesome. Loved it. Go have a good Sunday. Bye.